Joining us this Wednesday afternoon in November for today's webinar, H-1B lottery changes, what you need to know for fiscal year 2021 cap season. Excited for today's webinar. We have a first-time presenter from Envoy's affiliated law firm, Global Immigration Associates, who I will introduce in a moment. But I just want to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is a brief but informative session. The webinar will last for about 30 minutes, and that includes question and answer session. Think of this as a quick bite version of our typical H-1B webinar that we did last month. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send a link to download the recording after today's live session. You will also receive a link to download the slide deck and the continuing education credits for SHRM and HRCI. Again, that email will arrive tomorrow afternoon, so please keep an eye out for it. And if you don't receive it, let us know and we will get it over to you. If you do have a question throughout the presentation, we encourage you to ask it, and you can do so by typing it into the GoToWebinar control box that you should see somewhere on your screen. Type that in and we'll try to get to the question at the very end. Just as a reminder, given that, please try to keep your questions to very general. We can't ask any very case-specific questions. For those types of questions, please consult with your immigration attorney. For nearly 20 years, Envoy has been on a mission to fix the inefficient, frustrating, and confusing immigration process. Envoy combines expert legal representation with innovative technology to deliver the only platform that makes it seamless for companies to hire, mobilize, and manage a global workforce. Envoy secures work authorization in over 150 countries, has grown 41% year over year, and works with over 1,000 customers. We are particularly proud of our NPS score, which is a testament to the employee experience that we provide. And joining us today is Susanna Nichols. Susanna is a managing attorney at Global Immigration Associates, where her practice focuses on H-1B, L-1, TN, E, and O-1 non-immigrant visas, as well as PERM and EB-1 employment-based green cards. She has extensive experience responding to requests for evidence from USCIS and appeals to the Administrative Appeals Office, with a focus on corporate mergers and compliance. Susanna works with clients in several industries, including financial, technological, nonprofit, and transportation. And prior to joining GIA, Susanna worked as an associate attorney at Ogletree Deakins, where she oversaw responses to USCIS RFEs and appeals. She also worked closely on H-1B, E, O-1, TN visas, and employment-based adjustment of status. And prior to Ogletree, she worked on removal, defense, asylum, and immigration cases before the Executive Office for Immigration Review, Asylum Office, in the Eastern District of Virginia, and the Fourth Circuit. Susanna, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Great. So, Susanna, before we get to and for our attendees, before we get to the main presentation, just want to quickly provide a brief overview of the agenda for today, just the various sections that we'll be discussing. Starting with the H-1B lottery today, some important reminders and practice pointers, and then, as I mentioned, we'll end with a Q&A session. And as always, the content in this presentation, it is not intended as legal advice. For additional information, please consult with an Envoy affiliated attorney or another qualified professional. Okay, so let's jump into it and look at the H-1B lottery today. Starting with the 95% of employers say that sourcing foreign talent was important to their talent acquisition strategy, and this comes from the Envoy Global 2019 Immigration Trends Report. Foreign talent is a necessity for employers in today's hiring environment, and for them to find that skilled talent, there are numerous visas available, and the H-1B visa is one of the more popular employment-based immigration visas for the employers seeking those high-skilled specialty workers. Susanna, can you just briefly touch on some of the requirements and other high-level need-to-know items regarding the H-1B?
Sure. So the H-1B is would say probably the most popular non-immigrant visa that we see and that companies tend to want to gravitate to. And one of the reasons is because it's not position or industry specific. Some visas you actually have to have an intercompany transfer. Some it has to be just for religious workers. Some are for athletes. This one is really just that you have a specialized knowledge in a professional field. So that can apply to a lot of positions and a lot of companies. One thing that you do want to watch out for is that you do have someone with a college degree, or you can actually do a college equivalency. And that degree does need to be in a specialized field of study that is relevant to the position itself. So those are the big things that we look for when we're actually looking at the position. For instance, if you're working in some sort of tech field, you want to be a software engineer, then an engineering degree is important in order to qualify for that. If you do have something like a foreign language degree, you're going to get some pushback from USCIS, and that's as far as the actual specialty occupation version of it. So you really have to qualify in the position itself requiring that degree, and then also the person applying for it needs to also possess that related degree.
Awesome. So Susanna, as we move along, discussing the H-1B lottery, one thing we should discuss, because you'll be using the terminology during this presentation, are fiscal years. So as we take a look at this slide here, we have fiscal year 2020, and then the H-1B fiscal year 2021 cap season. Can you briefly explain the difference between the two and why it's important to differentiate between them?
Okay, sure. So when we're talking about the fiscal year, that's going to be the cap year that we're applying for coming up. So for instance, in 2019, we were applying for the 2020 fiscal year, and that's one that starts in October and runs through the following September. If you work with a lot of government officials, government contracts, that tends to be the calendar they run on, and that's how the lottery is actually rolled out. And so when we do speak about it, we do speak on those fiscal year terms as opposed to an actual a year that ends in December and begins in January.
Gotcha. Great. And then speaking of fiscal years, just have some numbers interesting to share. Can you highlight just the H-1B cap season in fiscal year for fiscal year 2019? I have to catch myself there. Question for you is, when does the lottery typically open? Average number of petitions received, and the cap.
Okay, sure. So the actual lottery opens on April 1st, and it tends to be open for the first 5 days. And in that time, you actually have a rush of petitions that are applying. So you could overflow. For instance, this year we had 190,000 petitions that went in, and of those petitions that come in during the window in which they accept, they then do the lottery part. So this only comes into play if it actually exceeds the amount of visas that are available that year. And this has happened, I believe, every year for the past, I want to say 5 or 6 years. I could be wrong, but it's been every year for a while. So once they do have all of these petitions, the days have exceeded the amount in which they will accept any more petitions, they then do a lottery. And at that point, they randomly select petitions. And then once that cap is exceeded, the amount that they can actually take for that year, they then stop and send the remainder of them back. Because this is such a demanded visa count, it almost always exceeds it, as you can tell by the numbers.
And we're actually going to, one of the changes that's going to be highlighted that we're going to discuss in a bit is the lottery selection. But before we get there, it's always important to discuss RFE rates. And USCIS did recently release updated statistics regarding H-1B petitions that received an RFE. So for fiscal year 2019, 40.2% of H-1B petitions received an RFE. This is the third straight year that RFE rates for the H-1B petitions have increased. Susanna, is this number at all surprising?
No, no, in that we are definitely seeing this. So we used to have, I would say, relatively reasonable RFP rates, and as you can see, they have just doubled. So I would definitely say around 40 in some industries with some companies. I'd say I know that they're running around 50% RFP rates.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at this as an average is sounds right to me, at least.
Mm-hmm. And then the other important number to consider or to keep in mind is then the 65.4% of petitions with an RFE then were improved in fiscal year 2019. So it's just very interesting to see these numbers on a fiscal year basis and seeing how they've increased over the years. Or in this instance, the approval with RFE percentage has decreased, although it did slightly tick up in fiscal year 2019 compared to fiscal year 2018. So Susanna, we're going to move on to the next section, and one of the changes that our attendees should be aware of, the H-1B lottery reversal. This actually went into effect for the previous cap season, but it's still relatively new, so obviously we would like to discuss it. So can you discuss the lottery reversal and what it means?
Okay, sure. So last year, they actually reversed the way in which they actually do the cap numbers. And the reason that they're doing this is because, at least from USCIS's standpoint, they want to have more people who are selected as part of the total number of H-1B applicants. They want them to have master's degrees as opposed to bachelor's degrees. And in order to accomplish that goal, they actually reversed the picking. So if you can see, they used to pull out the 20,000 master's cap immediately, and then they would do the regular cap. And in doing so, it actually shrank the pool essentially for the master's cap one. So now they're saying that it actually did go up, that they have reversed and they're doing the regular cap first and then the master's cap after.
And does this affect the way an employer may submit petitions?
No, not at all. So it doesn't affect anything that we're doing, our strategy, or should it affect really an employer's strategy. It just really does, I would say, impact the actual outcome, and that you're essentially, if you're an individual with a master's degree, you have a higher likelihood of being selected than you did in a year before.
Okay, interesting. And an interesting statistic that USCIS had released, I think to your point, they claim that this change would increase the number of selected petitions for employees with a qualifying U.S. master's degree or higher by 16%. Before we move on to Susanna, anything else to add on the lottery reversal?
No, I would just say that if you do have a qualifying master's degree, or rather your employee does, I mean, they definitely do have a better chance. Not every master's degree does count, though. For instance, some universities aren't really recognized by USCIS. Some online universities for profit. So if there's a master's tied to one of those degrees, it probably will not count in order to get them that extra edge in the lottery. But otherwise, no, that does make their chance a little bit better.
Gotcha. And we are getting a couple questions regarding the lottery reversal. We'll get to those in just a few minutes. So now the next big topic, which I'm sure everyone is curious about, and when we were putting together, we were still a little bit unsure on it, is electronic registration. It's been in the news a lot lately. So Susanna, what is electronic registration?
Well, that's a wonderful question. So we don't exactly know right now exactly what this is going to look like. We have seen USCIS's proposals. We've heard their ideas, but the general idea of it is that it should change the system so that right now, currently, we prepare all of the H-1B petitions fully and then submit them by the deadline with USCIS. So they go through, they actually pull the petition itself, and at that point, they then, perhaps issue an RFE. If you're not selected, they return the petition, and it's adjudicated from there. The idea behind the electronic registration is that you will then go in online and simply say, I have this company, I would like to sponsor this employee. And instead of actually going through the preparation of the H-1B petition, they'll go and do an online lottery. If you are selected, they will then tell you to go ahead and prepare a petition to be submitted. So essentially, you're doing the work on the back end as opposed to on the front end.
Gotcha. And so obviously, so the rule has yet to be finalized. But some news did come out, I believe it was last week, regarding a fee. Can you discuss this fee, and does it hint toward anything in the future?
USCIS's position right now is that they are planning to implement this for the next fiscal year. They also held this position last year at this time, and obviously it wasn't enacted for last year's lottery. But this new electronic registration fee was finalized, as of I want to say about a week ago, and this is now charging $10 for each employee in which you do want to put into the lottery. This is completely separate from any of the H-1B fees that have to go in, the filing fees, the fraud fees, the ACWIA fees. So this is solely for the electronic registration. They're saying it's for the upkeep of the actual system. But this has been finalized and does indicate that they do plan to move forward as much as possible. Whether or not it actually is implemented this year, we just don't know.
Right. And then today, as of today, that system has yet to be implemented, just as you said. And then just further reiterating that USCIS intends to move forward with the system. This September 30th letter from Ken Cuccinelli, who's currently the acting director of USCIS, we highlighted that section there that says USCIS intends to implement a registration process for the fiscal year 2021 cap season, subject to testing of the system. So, Susanna, I know it's obviously hard to say, but do you have a gut feeling when this announcement may or may not come out?
I know that they have just hit the 30 days for any sort of comments for the rule. They're not really great about sticking to their timeline, but I would anticipate something in December, something before the end of the year. That would be my guess. If we actually do see a final, even if we do see it, I still don't know if that indicates that we're definitely going to have the electronic registration in place by the time the actual cap season rolls around.
Right. And obviously, when that announcement, when it does come out, we will have a webinar on it and discuss what it means for employers. So be sure to stay tuned to Envoy updates for more information on that, and GIA will be able to discuss it further. So Susanna, we got one final section there, just some practice pointers for employers as the fiscal year 2021 H-1B cap season starts to creep closer and closer. What are some general practice pointers you have for our attendees currently listening?
Well, as we're going right now, we would say, start early. So make sure that you still continue to get the list of employees that you plan to sponsor, have their information, know what you're going to do, be as prepared as possible, and as early as possible. And the reason we're saying this is because the USCIS is not above doing last-minute switches. So if something does change, we like to know the information and have everything up front. Our plan is to continue on and plan until the electronic registration is not happening this year. Obviously, we will prepare both ways, so if we do need to switch over. But in order for your attorney, your counsel to actually represent you to the best of their ability, it's best to have all of the information ready and have a game plan in place.
And then what is another practice pointer that you have?
Okay, so if the H-1B, because the lottery, even if we do the registration, if we don't do the registration, you still don't necessarily know if you're going to get picked, right? So we would say look at alternatives. If you have other visa categories in which the employee could qualify, that's always a great place to look. If if you want to look at, if you have an exceptional employee, you can look at an O1. If you have someone who is tied to Canada, you can definitely look at visas with them. If they happen to work for a branch abroad, you can look at Ls. So it's definitely something where you want to go after the H, and that's totally understandable. But if you have alternatives, if you can avoid it, then that's something that people like to do a lot as well.
Awesome. And that's gonna bring us to the question and answer session. Susanna, thank you so much for going over the quick bite version of some H-1B lottery changes and things to know heading into the next year's cap season. For our attendees, again, if you do have a question and would like to ask, please type it in and we'll try to get to it. We have about 9 minutes to go, so we should have time for a few questions. But before we get there, I just want to highlight a couple webinars we have coming up. Tomorrow, we're going to examine Canada. Speaking of H-1B alternatives, more companies are looking toward Canada to hire and place foreign high-skilled talent. So please join us for that. And then next week, we'll be looking at trends and policies in Europe. As always, please subscribe to our mailing list to receive our latest webinar invites and important updates. And finally, we have some the Sherman HRCI continuing education credits that you can take a moment to copy down. Again, these will also be included in tomorrow's follow-up email. Okay, so Susanna, the first question, with regards to the lottery reversal, the question is, does it mean the master will be drawn only one time and bachelor only one time, or bachelor 2 times and master 1 time?
Okay, so they essentially have one big pool that they will put everyone in. And the only thing that's really changed is when they draw from that big pool before or after the master's cap. So there's a separate drawing solely for those who have master's degrees. That used to come before the other drawings. So what they would do is they would take the 190,000 applicants that had put in. They would pull out the 20,000 that they were going to use for master's caps. They all had degrees. Then they would leave the remainder of the master's caps in the big pool and pull again for the regular caps, so 65,000, which would total then 85,000. What they've done is that they've now reversed it. They do the big pool. So at this point, you then have everyone together. They pull out the 65,000, and then they do a separate drawing for solely the master's cap pool, and that's the 20,000. And what they're doing at that point is that you are essentially getting a better percentage if you have a master's degree by them doing that big pool of bachelor's and master's first, and then that second pool with master's separately. But there's not a sole bachelor's drawing at all.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you. Just taking a look at the questions that are coming in. So next question is with regards to RFEs. Susanna, in your time, what is maybe 1 or 2 common issues for an RFE not to be approved?
Okay, so I would say the ones that I'm looking at that I'm going to say this isn't going to have trouble are if it is a certain occupation field, and this will rotate. So I do see them target one occupation 1 year, and then they're going to go after a totally different one the next year. And they really would like to push back, and you're pretty much always going to be an RFE if you have something that falls under like a financial specialty, all other, where you're not just maybe doing development work, but you're doing development testing. They just don't like those vaguer categories. At least that's what I've noticed last year. The other big thing that I watch out for, and they don't like business administration degrees. Of the few denials that we have seen, that usually is one of them. So if you have a business administration degree, what I normally recommend is, and this is just my personal reference, and obviously, consult with your counsel, but I would have them see if you can maybe do an education experience combo, or even just see if they have a subspecialty, a subconcentration, and I use that as a relevant degree because those big generalized business degrees, uh, those could lead to denial, I would say, higher than maybe another more general specialized occupation or maintenance of status RFE.
Great, thank you. Okay, sorry. For our attendees, we're just chatting the questions to make sure that we're not getting touching on any too specific legal questions. Suzanne, I just chatted one more at you. Let's see what else we got here. So with regards to electronic registration, do you have any idea if there's a per company limit toward registration?
Okay, as of right now, the USAS is what they're presenting is that you can actually do batches of employees. They said as of right now, there does not appear to be a limit. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case, but when their proposed electronic registration system, you will put your company information in, and then you will actually enter each individual employee. And then from there, you can then batch pay all of the fees and then have them all listed and also be able to track the case. The one thing you do want to watch out for, and this is the same before, this won't be new, is that you can't duplicate anyone. Right, so you can't have the same employee and put them in 5 different times to kind of up their chances in the drawing. So you'll always be maxed out to one. They haven't specifically said whether or not there's going to be some sort of overall limit. I would be skeptical if there were, because honestly, at the end of the day, they're getting revenue from that, even if it is just $10. So I would say no, but I'm not 100% certain.
Gotcha. Thank you. So I think that's going to be the end of our questions for today. Sorry if we didn't get to if you typed a question in, but those are just a little too specific for us. So please consult with your immigration attorney regarding those. Susanna, we have about 2 minutes or so. Just any final remarks for our attendees regarding these H-1B lottery changes and just things to be aware of?
I would say, one, obviously prepare and start early just so that we can, have the information and be prepared whichever way this may go. We're all kind of waiting right now, but, the best thing to do is just kind of stay the course of the normal preparation cycle and also be able to switch it up if and when needed. I do think if the electronic registration goes into place, there are going to be technological hiccups. That's just my own personal view. So I would just say be patient and be as prepared as possible for each avenue.
Great. Good good closing remarks there. Susanna, that's going to end for our attendees. That's going to end things for today. I hope you enjoyed this quick bite version of some important H-1B lottery changes. Please share any feedback you may have. We really appreciate it. Susanna, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And to our attendees, again, this recording, the slide deck, and the continuing education credits will be sent out tomorrow afternoon. Thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
All right, thank you. Thanks.